Harrison Boone had seen a lot of strange things in his years as a field medic, but nothing quite like the scene before him. The alien operating room was filled with a dozen frantic medics, their skin various shades of deep blue and gray, their four-fingered hands moving in precise, desperate motions as they worked on the massive creature sprawled across the table. It barely fit, its thick fur matted with blood, its breathing shallow. One of the medics, a tall, slender being with bioluminescent veins pulsing along his arms, turned toward Harrison with an air of finality. "It is untreatable," the alien declared, his voice buzzing with resignation. "The internal damage is extreme. It will not survive." Harrison folded his arms, looking over the creature. It looked like an enormous wolf, except for the additional set of hind limbs and the faintly glowing streaks along its ribs. Its paws twitched slightly, and despite the raw, open wounds, its ears flicked, as if it still had some fight left in it. "That's not untreatable," Harrison said. "That's just a big puppy." The room fell silent. Every alien turned to look at him like he had just claimed the sky was green. The lead medic narrowed his eyes. "You do not understand. Its physiology is complex. The damage is beyond our capability to repair." Harrison grabbed a scanner from the nearest tray and ran it over the creature's body. The readings painted a grim picture: internal bleeding, fractured ribs, a punctured lung, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with the right approach. He had seen worse in ground battles back on Earth. "Let me work on it," he said. "I've patched up worse cases." The lead medic hesitated. "If you fail, it will suffer." Harrison met his gaze. "If we do nothing, it dies for sure." A moment of quiet deliberation passed before the alien gave a reluctant nod. Harrison rolled up his sleeves. "All right, let's keep this thing breathing." He set to work, guiding the alien medics through the procedures as he went. Their methods were advanced, but they lacked the adaptability humans had when it came to trauma care. They relied too much on predictive models and pre-approved techniques. Harrison had learned a long time ago that sometimes saving a life meant improvising. As he sutured a torn artery, the creature gave a low, pained whine. Its massive head shifted slightly, one golden eye cracking open to stare at him. "Shh, buddy, I got you," Harrison muttered. The alien medics exchanged glances, visibly unsettled. "You are speaking to it?" one asked. "It's scared," Harrison said, "and in pain. Talking helps." The lead medic shook his head. "It does not comprehend language." Harrison worked without looking up. "Doesn't matter. It understands tone, comfort." Another silence. Then, the alien beside him adjusted his instruments with newfound care. Hours passed as they stabilized the creature. Harrison guided them through manual respiration when the ventilator failed, explained how to reinforce the fractured ribs without crushing the lungs, and stitched wounds that their regeneration tech struggled to close. By the time they finished, the once doomed patient was breathing steadily, its injuries no longer critical. The lead medic stared at Harrison. "I do not understand how you succeeded." Harrison wiped sweat from his forehead. "Sometimes you just gotta look past the charts and see the patient." He patted the creature's massive shoulder. "And this one? Just a big puppy." The alien scrutinized him for a long moment before turning to the others. "We will observe its recovery." Harrison nodded, stepping back as exhaustion settled in. The creature let out a deep sigh, its body relaxing for the first time since it had been brought in. For now, at least, it was safe. 3 days later, the alien wolf was still alive. Harrison stood outside its containment unit, watching as the creature stirred on the cushioned platform. The alien medics had insisted on isolating it, worried its condition might deteriorate. Instead, it had defied every grim prediction. The monitors attached to its frame displayed steady vitals, and though its movements were sluggish, they were growing stronger. The lead medic, who Harrison had learned was named Vor'kaan, observed from the opposite side of the glass. His bioluminescent veins pulsed faintly, a sign Harrison had come to associate with deep thought. "It should not have survived," Vor'kaan said. Harrison exhaled through his nose. "Yet, here we are." Vor'kaan turned to face him. "The damage was beyond what our medical protocols consider recoverable. Even now, its cellular regeneration is functioning at an accelerated rate, despite no known external stimulus. We do not understand why. Harrison gestured toward the wolf. It wants to live. Varius studied him, then returned his focus to the enclosure. We have observed it responding to your presence more than any other. It becomes restless when you are absent. That explained why every time Harrison left the facility, he returned to reports of the wolf pacing until exhaustion forced it to rest. He stepped forward, placing a hand against the barrier. The wolf's ears flicked, its golden eyes slowly opening. Recognition flickered in them. It lifted its head slightly, nostrils flaring. Varys watched the exchange with unreadable intensity. You believe it has formed an attachment to you. Harrison shrugged. Wouldn't be the first time an injured animal latched onto the person who saved it. Varys tilted his head. It is not an animal. It is a Vor'kaan, a species known for their aggression and territorial nature. The wolf Vor'kaan, whatever they wanted to call it, huffed, attempting to shift its weight. The effort was slow, but it was progress. Harrison turned to Varys. It's strong. Give it a few more days and it'll be on its feet. Varys hesitated. If that is true, we must consider what happens next. The meaning in his words wasn't lost on Harrison. The Vor'kaan was recovering, but that raised a problem. The moment it was fully mobile, the facility wouldn't be able to contain it. A deep rumble came from within the enclosure. The Vor'kaan's muscles twitched, its body struggling to comply with the orders of its mind. Harrison stepped toward the entrance panel. I'm going in. Varys tensed. That is inadvisable. Harrison ignored the protest, inputting the access code. The barrier shimmered before parting. He stepped inside. The Vor'kaan didn't lunge, didn't growl. It simply watched. Harrison crouched a few feet away, keeping his movements slow. Gonna try something, big guy. Don't bite my face off. Carefully, he reached into his medkit, retrieving a small device. A portable stim unit. If the Vor'kaan's nerves were still sluggish, this would help regulate them. The creature exhaled sharply, its nostrils flaring as Harrison approached. He placed a hand against its side, feeling the slow rise and fall of its breathing. Easy, he murmured. The Vor'kaan didn't resist as he applied the stim unit, adjusting the settings. A subtle pulse ran through its body. The creature twitched, then let out a low, startled sound. Varys observed from the entrance. What are you doing? Helping, Harrison replied. The Vor'kaan shifted again, this time with more control. Its claws scraped against the platform, muscles responding with greater coordination. Varys remained silent. Harrison turned his attention back to the creature. All right, let's see if you can stand. The Vor'kaan hesitated, then pushed itself upward. Its limbs trembled but held. It stood, albeit unsteadily. Harrison grinned. That's more like it. The Vor'kaan turned its head toward him, golden eyes locking onto his. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, it took a step forward and pressed its massive forehead against his chest. Varys inhaled sharply. That is, unexpected. Harrison simply placed a hand on the Vor'kaan's fur. Told you, just a big puppy. 2 weeks later, the Vor'kaan wasn't just standing. It was moving, stretching, testing the limits of its newly healed body. The medical facility had extended its enclosure to accommodate the rapid progress, though Harrison suspected that soon no containment unit would be enough. Varys stood beside him, observing the creature as it prowled the reinforced space. Its movements were fluid now, muscles no longer sluggish. It was recovering faster than anyone had anticipated. Varys finally spoke. We must decide what to do with it. Harrison didn't look away from the Vor'kaan. You're worried. Varys kept his hands clasped behind his back. It is an apex predator. If it deems us a threat, containment will be impossible. The Vor'kaan's ears twitched at the conversation. Harrison had noticed how it paid attention when he spoke. Maybe it didn't understand words, but it understood tone, intent. Harrison exhaled. It doesn't see me as a threat. Varys hesitated. That is an anomaly. Harrison didn't argue. The Vor'kaan had never shown aggression toward him. If anything, it had become more cooperative. When the medics had struggled to administer final scans, Harrison had simply placed a hand on its shoulder and it had gone still. None of the others could get that close without it tensing. Ferris gestured toward the enclosure. If it is truly bonded to you, then you are the only one capable of leading it out of here safely. Harrison turned to face him. Out? Ferris nodded. We cannot keep it. It will grow restless. Confined, it may lash out. Harrison ran a hand through his hair. And where exactly do you think we should take it? Ferris's bioluminescence dimmed slightly, a sign of contemplation. Its kind is rarely encountered. We do not know where it came from. If we release it without guidance, it may not survive. Harrison looked back at the Vor'kaan. It was watching him again, golden eyes unwavering. He sighed. So, you want me to walk a giant alien wolf out of here and what? Hope for the best? Ferris didn't flinch. You have a better suggestion? Harrison scratched his jaw. Not yet. The Vor'kaan let out a low, rumbling sound, a noise Harrison had come to recognize as impatience. Ferris tilted his head. It grows restless. Harrison stepped forward, entering the enclosure without hesitation. The Vor'kaan's ears pricked up. It lifted its head, nostrils flaring as it took in his scent. Harrison crouched. You ready to stretch those legs? The Vor'kaan huffed, shifting its weight. Ferris observed warily. If it follows you willingly, we will proceed. Harrison didn't wait for a formal plan. He stood and walked toward the exit of the enclosure. The Vor'kaan hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, muscles rippling beneath thick fur. The guards stationed outside stiffened as the massive creature emerged, its claws clicking against the floor. Ferris raised a hand. Hold. The guards kept their weapons low, but their tension was palpable. Harrison kept walking. The Vor'kaan followed. Step by step, they moved through the facility. Every medic, every researcher, every armed personnel they passed watched in stunned silence as the supposed apex predator walked calmly beside the human who had saved it. When they reached the outer doors, Ferris input the release codes. The reinforced barriers parted, revealing the vast, open landscape beyond. Harrison turned to the Vor'kaan. All right, big guy, this is it. The Vor'kaan stared at the open world, then back at Harrison. Ferris watched closely. It does not leave. Harrison frowned. He stepped aside, creating space for the creature to run. Instead, it sat. Silence stretched between them. Ferris folded his arms. It has made a decision. Harrison exhaled. Looks like I've got a new shadow. By the time the Vor'kaan refused to leave his side for the third day in a row, Harrison had officially accepted that he was now responsible for something that could probably take down a transport shuttle if it felt like it. Ferris had been watching the development with growing intrigue, occasionally muttering observations about unprecedented bonding behavior and disruptions to known predator instincts. Harrison mostly ignored it. The Vor'kaan, who he had started calling Brutus, wasn't going anywhere, and that meant figuring out what to do with him before someone higher up decided the situation was a security risk. The answer came sooner than expected. A distress call pinged through the facility's emergency channels. An off-world transport had suffered a catastrophic engine failure and was on a collision course with the planet's surface. It wasn't a military ship, and it wasn't enemy action. Just bad luck and worse timing. Rescue efforts were already scrambling, but the terrain near the crash site was unstable, making standard recovery operations difficult. Ferris found Harrison in the medical bay, scanning through the preliminary casualty reports. The terrain is volatile, Ferris stated. Standard craft cannot land without risk of collapse. Harrison frowned. How bad are the injuries? The report estimates 7 critically wounded, with another 15 suffering non-fatal trauma. If they are not extracted within the next few hours, the situation will deteriorate. Harrison exhaled sharply. And you're telling me this because? Ferris glanced toward the reinforced enclosure. The Vor'kaan is built for such terrain. Harrison blinked. You want me to take Brutus into a disaster zone? Ferris inclined his head. It would be the swiftest method of extraction. Harrison turned toward Brutus, who was resting near the back of the enclosure, ears twitching at the conversation. The idea was insane. Then again, so was half the stuff he'd already done. 30 minutes later, he was securing emergency medical supplies to Brutus's reinforced harness, while a team of engineers modified the straps for better weight distribution. The Vor'kaan tolerated the adjustments with mild curiosity, occasionally flicking his tail in annoyance, but otherwise, Varys monitored the preparations. If this fails, retrieval will be impossible. Harrison tightened the last strap. Good thing we don't plan on failing. The crash site was worse than expected. The transport shuttle had broken apart on impact, leaving jagged wreckage strewn across uneven rock formations. Smoke curled into the sky. The ground was unstable, shifting unpredictably beneath Harrison's boots. Brutus, however, moved with effortless ease, claws digging into the terrain for balance. The first survivors were huddled near the remains of the central fuselage. Some were conscious, others barely holding on. Harrison immediately assessed the worst cases. 2 had severe crush injuries, another was in shock from blood loss. There was no time for proper stabilization. He had to work with what he had. Brutus crouched as Harrison secured the first stretcher to the harness. The injured passenger groaned weakly, but didn't resist. With a low rumble, Brutus rose and navigated the treacherous path back toward the waiting medics. Harrison worked quickly, stabilizing wounds, applying temporary splints, and ensuring no one was left behind. Brutus transported each patient with steady precision. The final survivor, a young engineer with a fractured leg, hesitated as Harrison secured him to the harness. "This thing safe?" the engineer rasped. "Safer than staying here," Harrison replied. Brutus didn't wait for further debate. With a powerful leap, he cleared a crumbling section of the wreckage and carried the last survivor to safety. Varys was waiting when Harrison arrived with the final patient. The alien's bioluminescence pulsed faintly, something Harrison had come to recognize as restrained astonishment. "The mission was successful," Varys observed. Harrison wiped sweat from his forehead. "Yeah, no kidding." Brutus exhaled sharply, then flopped onto his side with an exhausted grunt. Harrison patted his shoulder. "Good job, big guy." Varys studied the scene. "This changes things." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "How so?" The alien's gaze lingered on Brutus. "The Vor'kaan is no longer merely a patient, it is an asset." Harrison sighed. "That sounds like the start of a bureaucratic nightmare." Varys didn't deny it. Brutus, however, simply closed his eyes and fell asleep. A week after the rescue, Brutus had become a problem. Not in the way the higher-ups had feared. He hadn't turned on anyone or decided to test his strength against facility walls, but in a subtler, quieter way. He refused to sleep anywhere except the space just outside Harrison's quarters. No amount of coaxing, relocating, or even outright ordering had changed that. If Harrison left, Brutus followed. If Harrison sat down, Brutus found a way to lay nearby. Varys had documented it all with a level of fascination that could only come from an alien witnessing something he had no framework for. But today, he wasn't observing from a distance. He was standing in Harrison's doorway, watching as the massive Vor'kaan curled up just outside, resting his head on his enormous front paws. "This is unsustainable," Varys stated. Harrison, who was still toweling off from a post-workout shower, didn't look up. "Yeah? Try telling him that." Varys stepped closer, bioluminescent veins shifting colors in slow, deliberate pulses. "It remains near you at all hours. It does not exhibit this behavior with anyone else." Harrison tossed the towel onto a nearby chair. "Because I'm the one who pulled him through when he should have died. It's not complicated." Varys didn't look fully convinced. Vor'kaan do not bond like this. Harrison leaned against the wall. "According to who?" Varys' expression tightened. Frustration, maybe, or something close to it. "According to every documented interaction we have ever had with them." Harrison shrugged. Then maybe those interactions weren't under the right conditions. Varys exhaled sharply. He studied Brutus for several long moments, then turned back to Harrison. "We have received a request." Harrison raised an eyebrow. "That's never good." Varys ignored the remark. A research team has encountered another injured Vor'kaan. This one is feral, unlike yours. Attempts to approach it have resulted in aggression. They seek assistance. Harrison crossed his arms. Let me guess, they want me to bring Brutus along and hope for the best? Varys inclined his head. Harrison sighed. Where? The coordinates led to a dense jungle region, far from the facility. The research team had set up a temporary outpost near the injured Vor'kaan's location, but they stayed at a distance, unwilling to risk provoking it further. Brutus moved through the thick undergrowth with ease, his massive frame surprisingly quiet given his size. Harrison followed, Varys beside him, both navigating the uneven terrain with less grace. When they reached the clearing, the second Vor'kaan came into view. It was smaller than Brutus, leaner, with a jagged wound running along its hind leg. Dried blood matted its fur, and its golden eyes burned with distrust. Brutus halted. His ears flicked forward. Harrison kept his voice low. All right, big guy, what's the move here? Brutus let out a deep, almost imperceptible rumble. The injured Vor'kaan stiffened. Varys observed closely. They are assessing one another. Harrison glanced at him. And if this goes south? Varys didn't answer. Brutus took a slow step forward. The injured Vor'kaan bared its fangs, but didn't retreat. Harrison could see the tension in every muscle. If Brutus pushed too hard, this would turn into a fight neither of them wanted. Brutus stopped just short of striking distance. He lowered his head slightly, not submission, but something close to acknowledgement. For a long, breathless moment, the other Vor'kaan didn't move. Then, slowly, it shifted its weight, testing its injured leg. The moment it faltered, Brutus stepped closer. Harrison exhaled. He's not challenging, he's offering support. Varys murmured something in his native language. Whether it was approval or disbelief, Harrison couldn't tell. Brutus remained still as the wounded Vor'kaan hesitated, then leaned against him. Harrison moved quickly, pulling a medkit from his pack. All right, let's patch this one up before it changes its mind. The treatment was slow and cautious. Any sudden movement risked spooking the injured creature, but Brutus's presence kept it grounded. By the time Harrison finished, the wound was cleaned, stitched, and stabilized. The second Vor'kaan stepped back, testing its leg again. This time, it held. Brutus rumbled in approval. Harrison wiped sweat from his brow. Well, that went better than expected. Varys watched the two creatures. This is not what we have observed before. Harrison chuckled. I'm starting to think you guys just haven't been paying attention. When they returned to the facility, Brutus still refused to sleep anywhere except outside Harrison's quarters. Except now he wasn't alone. The second Vor'kaan curled up beside him. Varys stood in the hallway, staring at the sight. Harrison clapped him on the shoulder. Welcome to the new normal. Varys exhaled. I am unsure if I approve. Harrison grinned. Too late for that.